If you are looking for a wedding podcast that's not just fun but goes a little deep, then you have found it. We're the Feel Good Wedding Podcast by Polka Dot Wedding, and my name is Dorothy, and I am also known as Ms Polka Dot. I am the founder and editor of Polka Dot Wedding, and I have been writing about weddings for 16 years. The Feel Good Wedding Podcast dives a little deeper than the stories. Of course, we tell the stories. We tell plenty of them. But we're also talking about vendor advice. We're also talking about business advice, and we're also diving a little deeper beyond those stories. We're diving into the mistakes and the I wish I did, and the problems and the qualms that these couples have, and that vendors have too. We've got so much in store. We're jumping into season 2, and we can't wait to have you along for the ride. Keep on listening, and we'd love to hear from you, so make sure you stick around. The Polka Dot Wedding team is honoured to conduct our work on the land of the Boonwurrung, Woiwurrung, Eora, and Kurungay people. We honour the traditional Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander custodians of the land, and we pay our respects to elders past and present.
Yeah, welcome back to another episode of the Feel Good Wedding Podcast. We have a really special episode today because we are going behind the scenes again with you. We are talking with two of our amazing pattern people. We have Mary, Miss Rose, our specialty blog editor, of course. And we also have new special guest, Julia, who is our submissions manager. And today we're talking about something that we don't really feel has been talked about recently or enough. There's been so many conversations about the mental load and the bandwidth of housework and running a household. And we realized that this is something that comes into play in weddings. And we thought, why not talk about this in our next behind the scenes episode? So I'm really thrilled to have the pattern people with us today as we dive in on our thoughts about bandwidth and planning weddings and who carries that mental load. So let's dive on in, and I'll give a warm welcome to the lovely Mary, Miss Rose, and the lovely Julia, Ms Peacock. Hello and welcome, and thank you so much for joining me again.
Hello. Good morning.
Hello.
How are we going?
Good morning.
Really excited to get into this topic today because I think that, like you were saying, there is so much you see all over social media, and there are so many articles and all this sort of thing about, you know, the mental load of life as a general thing and who carries that. But I think when we were brainstorming doing this behind the scenes chat, we were sort of saying, hang on, no one really talks about the bandwidth of wedding planning and who carries that mental load. Ms Polka, like, what do you think? Like, what do you think is the kind of the definition of the mental bandwidth of wedding planning? Like, and what do we want to focus on with that? Like, what do you think it is?
So I've always said that, like, someone carries the mental bandwidth, and it doesn't matter if you are planning the wedding yourself or if you have a wedding planner or you don't have a wedding planner, because there is someone that is silently carrying that load of, okay, is this vendor showing up? Has this vendor been paid? Have I booked that vendor? But then right through to the day of, okay, have the candles been lit? Is this happening? Is that happening? And I remember I had a wedding that I was a part of years ago, and they had no wedding planner. And I was, of course, me, who was adoring weddings and wanting to help and do all that stuff. Yeah, exactly. And I was the one that ran around and was like, oh, it's windy, the vases are falling down, I've got to sit them up, and oh, the candles aren't lit. And I remember at my sister-in-law's wedding, the candles weren't lit, so my husband and I ran around and lit all the candles. Like, there's that little mental stuff that is silent stuff, as it is at home when we're doing, like, washing and ironing and vacuuming, that goes into a wedding that is unspoken. Exactly. And I think it's something, again, we don't talk about in weddings at all.
I agree. I totally agree. And I think that, you know, for us especially, I mean, I know we're not wedding planners, but we have seen a few weddings, surprise, surprise. And, you know, we've, you know, when we're all married, like the three of us have had a wedding, I think it would be, you know, safe to say that, you know, we've read about how couples feel about having planned their day. It's actually one of the questions, you know, on our questionnaire, you know, what was your favorite thing about wedding planning and any advice for other couples? Because I think imparting advice on how to plan or things to focus on is, you know, it's really helpful for people who are just diving into this whole world of wedding planning. And I think when people get engaged, they don't, you know, they know that they have to then go and plan a wedding, whatever that looks like for them. But I think, you know, a big theme that kind of runs through when we ask couples this question is, you know, I didn't realize how hard it was going to be and how big it was going to be. And, I love it when I see couples talk about having delegated to family
Yes.
members or friends. Like that feels so lovely. But it's almost like that, you don't quite know about this mental load until it happens.
And look, I delegated a lot for our wedding, and I will talk about that soon, but I lost my mind when I had to buy a marker for our guest book because I was like, I'm so done. I've done so much for this wedding, and we've delegated everything. Like, there was so much that I was conscious of, but I was like, I can't do one more thing.
Yeah,
I'm like done. I'm so done.
Tapping out. I'm tapping out. Actually, I want to talk about all of our experiences, even just to touch on Julia, our beautiful Ms Peacock. Hello. Tell us about the planning of your wedding with your lovely wife, Em. In terms of the actual planning, what was that process like?
Yeah, so I proposed to Em. It would have been, I'll give you a bit of backstory because then it will explain why sort of we did what we did. So I proposed to Em on New Year's Eve, and then we knew that we wanted to get married at my mum's property. And my dad had previously passed away, and she was going to sell the property really soon. So we felt immense pressure to have a wedding quite soon. So we sort of decided on a date, and we didn't take into consideration other life commitments that we'd have during that time that we'd need to plan the wedding. So I offloaded, I'm going to say 85% of the wedding to my beautiful sister who came through with the goods, because we were going through IVF at the time. I had just got a new job and I was traveling 4 hours every day to work. And then we had just started renovating a house. So to say that we didn't have the bandwidth to really keep up with the wedding planning was an understatement. So this topic resonates with me because I was so lucky, we were so lucky that we had my sister who loves planning weddings and parties and can really do it in her sleep.
Yeah.
And Mary, you touched on a comment before. I think after a wedding has happened, it's easy for couples to look back on the planning experience with a positive lens. You sort of romanticize it because it's all come together. The days happened. It was beautiful. But when you are planning it, it's really stressful. There are so many elements to think about. And look, Mary and I actually used to work at a bridal store.
We did.
And you can really feel the stress, that it is cast upon the bride's shoulders. So, yeah.
And that was something that I was going to ask you, Julia, because Mary and I are both in heterosexual relationships, and a lot of the bandwidth is often placed on the bride because, as we have talked about as a team, so much of the marketing is directed towards the bride and not the groom, etc. Did you find there was anything particular with you and your wife about the way that you were approached by vendors or the way you dealt with vendors? I know your sister did most of it.
She did.
There was no sort of bride, groom, the bride is the one in control and all that sort of stuff that we hate so much.
Yeah, sure. I think, to be honest, I don't know that my lovely wife, Emily, she really hates being the center of attention. She finds she's incredibly shy. And so she wasn't really fussed on anything. I guess she trusted my opinion and my process to sort of contacting vendors, and I'd run things past her. But I guess in that sense, she wasn't, too fussed about what vendor I would choose. But I do have to say, I would seek out the vendors. I know I said my sister did most of the planning, but I would send her photographers and I would contact photographers that I liked the style of. I was incredibly intimidated to contact vendors, and I would worry about saying it's my wife and my wedding because, still to this day there is, judgment cast upon same-sex couples, and that was a huge stress for me.
And not as much representation, when you don't see, a representation or, an image of, say, what your relationship looks like, you sort of go, on Instagram or on websites. And look, there are so many today now, but still, like you're saying, if there's not that much representation, you're not going to jump in and go, they're going to tell my story and my day beautifully.
Absolutely.
You kind of want to see that reflection of oh, hang on, that, a photographer will know, how my wife and I would like to possibly stand together in photos, or or have our portraits done, or anything like that. You sort of want to make sure that you're looking for vendors and photographers and all that sort of those sort of people who are going to kind of get you a bit as well, like
a whole extra layer of bandwidth.
Yes, exactly, it is.
It really is. And I remember looking at photographers' Instagram feeds and just hoping that I would see a same-sex couple. And then I would know that they would be open to receiving an email from us. I mean, and this is in 2018. This is not, that long ago.
Yeah.
And, you're absolutely right. It does add a whole extra layer of bandwidth on an already, stressful time in your life.
Something that I love, just in terms of mental bandwidth and like going, how much mental capacity am I going to give this part of the wedding? I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Julia, but I think you were saying that with Emily's outfit for the day, she wasn't too fussed, but she picked like X amount of outfits and then just put them on, and you were like, yep, that one. And she was like, right, great, off we go. Like, this is the one I'm going to wear. And I love that story, because I just think, good for you. Like, that you know that you wanted to look nice, but you also weren't so caught up in it. And you just and I love that she just kind of went, all right, well, that's my decision. Like, I just find that
the decision that I made for her. So
kids, so I have more mental capacity.
Yeah, well, we could look at it as though she offloaded, and she did find it incredibly stressful to even stand up in front of all of the people who we love. So she found that very stressful. So for her to be able to offload choosing what she wore on the day, I mean, it does sound terribly controlling, but she needed me to do that. And I remember spending hours ordering things online and having them come, and we try them on, and we just found one that clicked, and she just felt good in it. So,
and that's the whole point, isn't it? That's it. And it's sort of like that, I've got this, I've got 60% capacity to be able to give to this planning process. And look, well, I've got 40, or, I've got 20% today. Okay, well, I'll cover the 80, like that sort of give and take. But that doesn't happen so often, like Polka was saying before, where because so much of it is marketed to brides, it feels like there's not that good shift of percentage of bandwidth, because a lot of it is one person doing so much of it. Ms Polka, what was your experience like? Like, did Mr. Polka do what was his percentage?
I was so I knew that the marketing of the wedding industry was tailored towards brides, and in fact, down to the point that we went to a wedding expo and we did an experiment where I did not talk and he did all the talking, and some of the vendors were very confused and looked at me and were like, "Who is this? Like, why is he talking? Why are you silent?" But I was so adamant that he had to be involved, because that's our relationship works like that. I'm not like, I will research and then I would go to him with what I had figured out. Like, these are the photographers I would really love to use. Pick one. Like, I forced him, dragged him. He didn't really drag him. He was quite happy. But I made him be involved, because I was like, I don't want this to be my day. I want it to be our day. I want it to be a joint effort, because that's the way our relationship works. We also hired a wedding planner because I'm a big advocate for wedding planners, and I knew that if we didn't, that the mental bandwidth would fall on someone. And I had been that person in other weddings where, there was no one taking photos of the bride getting ready. I did it. Like, at last minute, like literally 10 seconds, I was like, oh my God, you need photos. Like, all that little tiny detail, I knew that if I didn't carry that my mum would, or a guest would, or something, I was like, nah, I want you to all enjoy it. So, on the two levels, I forced my husband to be involved or encouraged him. I was like, nah, I'm not doing this on my own. And I also had a wedding planner, because I was like, nah, stuff this, I'm not. And even to the fact, the week before the wedding, when I was trying to wrap up Polka stuff to take some time off, I said to all our vendors, I'm not communicating with you, he is. And he took over all the communication and did all the decisions. And I think, that's the way we work. And it was really important for me that it was not all on me. And that because it also, I think when one person carries the bandwidth, it almost becomes a bit like it's their day, because they have to carry all the decisions. And I was like, nah, not doing it. What about you, Miss Rose? Because you had a much more, we did DIY, but you had a much more like beautiful DIY country wedding with your husband.
It was definitely more DIY. We definitely had like lovely vendors, like our caterers came in who were wonderful. And we had like hire company who came in and set up like our marquee and all that, and all the tables and all that sort of thing. But we did a fair bit of DIY for it in terms of, we did all the flowers, and we fed our guests a lot. So the caterers came in and did like lunchtime, a lunch sort of style thing, but we then did like an afternoon thing, and then the caterers were back again to do an evening thing. So like we did DIY a fair bit of it because it was at my parents' house, and we thought with that we could kind of do our own thing, which was really lovely and freeing. That also means that you have to do a lot of the work.
You do.
Yeah.
You do have to do a lot of the work.
Yeah.
It was, look, I really want to say that I enjoyed wedding planning. I didn't hugely because it was really stressful. And this comes down to bandwidth, because my husband Lewis and I, we did most of it ourselves. We had support in terms of people that we could bounce ideas off of, but we didn't have a wedding party. We had flower girls, which were divine, our nieces. But we did all of the wedding planning ourselves. We put together Spotify playlists. We sourced everything. We, on the day and in the lead up during the week, we had a lot of help in terms of family and friends came to help set up and help to pick things up and collect things. And I sourced a lot of our table centerpieces from vintage shops and that sort of thing. And I had people who came and helped with those and transport them. And so we had friends and family who, I'd say the week of, and then the next day, the day after the wedding, were so helpful and gave so much of their time to help set up. But in terms of the actual planning, Lewis and I did that all really ourselves. And that was a really stressful time because, and I will say, in my older age, I'm not so much like this anymore, but when we were planning our wedding, we were a bit younger and we were people pleasers. And
so many are.
Yeah, they are. Yep. And I'm not saying, don't try and give your guests a, good day, make it all about you. And it is all about you. And for a lot of people, that includes making sure their guests have a beautiful, fun party and a lovely time, which is what we wanted to do. But I think we took on so much of like, will this date work for someone? Oh, but is this going to put that particular one person out? And is the date, if we don't have this for this weather plan backup, is that going to put my family out at their house?
But sometimes you have to go through that in order to realize what you don't want. Like you almost can't think about that beforehand sometimes because it's I've never planned a wedding before. I don't know what I want and what I want it to feel like.
You can't think about that beforehand until you're actually thrown into it and doing it.
Yeah.
I think we thought about people too much. Like I think we definitely could have just calmed our farms and sort of said, hang on, wait a minute, what's going to work best for us? We didn't want to put anyone out, and I don't think anyone should, there should always be a thought of what's going to be more comfortable for your guests, or is this particular guest going to be able to be there and comfortable and happy in terms of inclusivity and all of that sort of thing. But I think
you do that because you love your guest, and it's really hard to not do that. And I agree with you. You sort of do need to put yourself first, but it's so easy to slip into that.
It is. And we also, Julia, like I hear you talking about having your lovely sister do so much of the organising and planning. I think that is a dream, and I wish we had done more of that. In our minds at that point, we were like, it's our choice to get married. We have to do it all. Like we're going to do it all. And now I go, I think we have lovely friends and family who would be very happy to help us.
I mean, I would plan your wedding, just so you know. I would plan your wedding.
You would. Oh my God, I've asked you, what do you think this is? What do you think we need for this?
Yeah.
I mean, we all have that one friend or family member who on the day or leading up to the day, they message you and say, I'm here. Whatever you need. Yeah. If you need, like on our wedding day, we were having it outdoors and it was forecast rain. And we thought, because it was my mum's house, there was no nearby venue that we could just run to. And so we thought, well, we don't have umbrellas for our 200 guests. What do we do? And so we messaged a few people and they're like, yep, what do you need? And they delivered 50 umbrellas to us. You know,
they're goodies. Oh,
they are goodies. So, you know, whoever's listening, make sure you do that to the next wedding you're going to. You did.
Ask if they need umbrellas.
Oh my God. Reasons I didn't get married outside.
It's a good point. It's beautiful, but it's a very mine rained up like the whole week right before the day. It absolutely bucketed, and the day was overcast but lovely. So thank goodness for that. So like in terms of like, so we didn't really outsource. Ms Polka, you did outsource. Not all of it, but you
we did a lot of the planning ourselves, and we did a lot of the decor details. We did a lot of DIY because I love my crafty things.
Yeah, you do.
Which sort of segues us into the bandwidth of DIY, because
that's it.
I think it's really tricky when you've got a small wedding budget, because you're like, well, I need to DIY so much more in order to get what I want for my wedding. But on the other hand, the DIY is this extra layer of bandwidth.
Yeah.
And so we found during the wedding plan, it was this whole juggle of what is worth us doing ourselves versus paying someone to do, because then they can just take it off us.
I think that comes down to what are the things that we're happy to do ourselves? What are the things we actually really love to do, which we're happy to do ourselves? And what's something that we're just know either A, we're going to really not enjoy it, so it's worth outsourcing it, or it's going to take a very long time to do it and I don't have that time or the capacity for it and I'm going to outsource that.
And being sensible with what that capacity actually is. Like, yes, you can make your own wedding cake, but do you have the capacity 2 days before your wedding to make your own wedding cake?
It's not just the sort of, I want to be in the kitchen and whipping something up. You're like, wait, what else are you going to be doing in that lead up? Or maybe it is something, maybe you love to bake and you go, do you know what? I'm going to say all the other things can be delegated or outsourced. But I know that I'm going to get such joy from making this cake, and I know I'm going to be sort of out of action in those few days before the wedding, but I'm going to make sure that this is ready to go, and I've delegated the rest of it because I really want to do this. And that was sort of joy. It's going to bring me joy, and that's sort of what I did the morning of our wedding, was that I really wanted to do the flowers. Like, I really wanted to get all the flowers from a flower farm nearby, and I wanted it to be put in these vintage vases, and I wanted it to be haphazard and very thrown together. And that was one of my most favorite parts of the day. Was I had maybe one of my aunts and then like two other friends of mine who were there and myself, and we were there throwing flowers into vases, and it was, we had music on, and we were sort of in an undercover sort of pergola area of my parents, and it smelled incredible. I still to this day, and this is like 13 years later, I can so remember how vividly happy I was in that moment. And so it's something, it's like one of those things where you go, all right, I'm going to get joy from this particular thing, so I am going to spend the time doing it. But I think a lot of people go, I'm going to have a DIY wedding, and they just go, I can do that, I'll throw it together. But it's sometimes not that simple.
No.
Yeah.
And I think you also need to, to a certain degree, account for things going wrong. Like, I was just thinking about baking the cake like the day before or 2 days before. Like, if something happens and the cake doesn't turn out, then that's just adding such an extra layer of stress.
It really does.
And like, Mary, if you didn't have your lovely aunt and your friends to help you, like, that would have been quite a mammoth task for you.
Absolutely. And it's, look, I think there's pros and cons to DIY, obviously. I think if you DIY, there is a chance to make it cheaper sometimes, depending on how you DIY. I think that it can actually bring you together with people, like my example before about doing it with my aunt and my friends. That was really lovely. So, I get that joy. I got that joy from it. So there's that pro for it. You can kind of do it up and, you can get excited and do a bunch of DIY in the lead up to your wedding. Like Ms Polka was saying, if you're crafty, like she's crafty, if you feel crafty, this might be one of the things you really, really dream about. The cons with DIY is that it isn't always cheaper depending on the materials you get and how much you have to do. the time that it takes to do the DIY, depending on what it is, could be a lot, and that your time versus money may not add up there. It might be maybe you're trying your hand at something you've never done before, and it, like you're saying about Jules, about having to think about things going wrong. If you haven't accounted for something going wrong, that could be quite a stressful situation where you're like, oh my God, I thought that was going to work and it didn't.
Absolutely.
You know, like I think if you know going in with a DIY wedding that it's going to take time and effort, and you are happy
And money.
Yep.
Like it's not. Let's be honest in that DIY. Even if you're making your own cake, it doesn't cost nothing. You've got to buy. If you're making your own cake, all the ingredients that you might not get at cost price, and then you've got all the money of like the fondant and all the other stuff you've got to obviously buy out of pocket at retail rates.
That's it.
Exactly.
I think my wedding is probably the perfect example of a fairly good DIY wedding that was not as cheap as you think. And look, we didn't do our wedding DIY to sort of save money. I think location had a big part of it. We were sort of, you know, a bit rural in northern New South Wales, so we didn't have access to lots of vendors. And I have to say, we blew budget tenfold. And I do think, Mary, you were touching about before, when you have your wedding, I guess, on a property or at your parents' place, there are things you need to think about that you don't need to think about when you have them at a wedding, at a venue.
Yeah, exactly. Like toilets.
Mary. Like, where does everyone park?
Yep.
Where does everyone stay?
Yep. What if it rains? Like,
what if it rains? Exactly. We were lucky that we hired the 3 big teepee tents that we could quickly move inside, and thank goodness we did, because it hailed when we were saying our vows. And I mean, we had in excess of 200 people there, and I don't know what we would have done had everyone been sopping wet on a little island, rural New South Wales. Yeah, so definitely, I think if you're planning a wedding, DIY is not always cheaper.
It's definitely not. And also, I'm going to go back on our who carries the mental load. You might be particularly DIY, esque, but what if your partner isn't? What if your partner's like, nah? What if you're like, oh, let's do our invites. Let's do it. And which some people are going to do it, and it's going to be amazing. And others are, what if you're excited about it, but your partner's like, okay,
and you carry it.
Okay, and you have to carry that. Then you have to do that. Like, sometimes it's about managing what your partner wants and what you want in terms of that DIY. If they are going to come with you on that whole journey of DIY, or if you're happy to say, do you know what, I'm really excited to do it. I know it's not your thing, but I've realized that, and I'm going to take this, then so be it. But it's just putting the thought behind it first, I think, and going, hang on, are you going to be able to do this essentially by yourself, or essentially, with a little less help than you would ideally hope? Like, and again, though, I will say for DIY, speaking from experience of not having done it as much as I should have, delegate. There are people who want to help you. There are people who are so excited for you as well. And it's having conversations and saying, I really want to do a DIY. I really would love to go and find these vintage pieces to style. And it's finding your friend who's keen to go shopping with you and to do it with you. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's
spreading the joy for your wedding too.
It is. And having the conversations to see who's keen to help. Also not assuming you'll get help either as well, because not everyone's super keen. There are people, I'm sure.
There are people, and I was saying to Emily, my lovely wife, we were so lucky that my sister, she really did live and breathe our wedding, and we were so lucky because we just didn't have any bandwidth to do it, and not everyone is that lucky. And I think my advice would be to put your wedding off, or just delay it for a little bit until
hire someone.
Oh my God!
Wedding planners are amazing for a reason.
Yeah. I would
absolutely
think of them like your housekeeper for your house, because they can take all your mental load, and they can take, like, for us, I really wanted it to be personal, so I did a lot ourselves. But handing that over, especially on the day for the setup, was just, it was so worth it.
That would have been so dreamy. If I got married again and if I was doing the whole beautiful big shebang, I would absolutely hire someone. Like, I cannot tell you how much less stressful that would be. Like, it would just, oh my goodness.
To just turn up on the day and imagine.
Oh my goodness.
I think working in this job has made me realize, definitely what I would do differently.
Yeah.
And I've said to Em, if I ever get married again, not that I ever would, but this is what we would have.
Yeah. And you know what? Like,
the wedding redos.
I think a lot of it as well, like, yes, there's the mental bandwidth of actually figuring out your time versus your money versus your effort versus all of that. But emotional bandwidth plays a huge role in the whole planning process as well. Like, there's the emotional bandwidth of you and your partner, of you and your friends, of you and your family. It's finances. It's, it's a huge part of it as well. And I think that's something a lot of people go into wedding planning feeling like, we're going to connect, my partner and I are going to connect, and it's going to be so fun. And you know what? If it is, that's incredible. Like, that's the dream. But I think a lot of couples find that it is quite a stressful process. And I feel like that can put a lot of strain on you as an individual and on you as a couple as well. I don't know how you both found the emotional bandwidth of planning your weddings, or if you've read through, we get real wedding submissions all the time, which is so beautiful, and we're so lucky to read these beautiful stories. But a lot of the time as well, we have people saying it was really stressful. I had to take time for myself. My partner and I had to make sure that, we connected still. Like, it was a lot more than I expected. And I think, we also hear stories of family and friend drama that comes into play. I don't know. I think especially even having weddings at, trying to do the DIY and having weddings at a family home, that can also throw in a few other,
other stress.
Other stresses and areas, that might put a bit of pressure, some pressure points and that sort of thing.
I think the emotional side of mental bandwidth of weddings is really big, because you're having these conversations that you might not have had before as a couple, and you're having them around really difficult things like money. Mm-hmm. Like, are our parents contributing? How do we have a conversation with our parents about contributing? What kind of say do they get in the wedding with guests and all that kind of stuff if they do contribute? How do we navigate all these tricky conversations with each other? Like, oh, you really want to invite that friend who I hate? Or, you really want to do that and that doesn't align with what I like. Like, there's so much emotion to deal with, and everyone else's emotion. It's not just your emotion as a couple. It's everyone else's emotion. And even to the point where one of you might be holding all of that discussion about guest lists and family, etc. And the other one might be like, well, my family's fine. It doesn't affect me. And so one of you might be carrying all of that as well. We didn't have a lot of stress.
That's
like
nice.
We did in some guests, but we were so united on it. But we didn't have a lot of societal expectations, because I was so like, no, stuff it. I want to do it my way.
Yeah.
Like, I was so aware of it, I think, going into it because of Polka Dot Wedding, that I was heightened to everything that could go wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's such a hothouse of emotion. It's not just about ticking a box, is it? It's like, this wedding represents us. It's so important. Like, it becomes so important to you as a couple. So, like, I don't know how you navigate that.
Yeah, I don't know how you do it either, but I was just thinking about even the tiniest little details. I had a friend who got married a couple of months ago, and she was at her emotional bandwidth, and it came to the day before her wedding, and she went to get her nails done, and this isn't to sound superficial because it's not, but it was the wrong color, and it just sent her over the edge.
To the last straw.
Yeah.
The last straw. And those little things, you want to feel beautiful on your day. You want to look how you look in your head. And she ended up finding strength from her maid of honor, who just sorted it out, said, I'm taking this off your plate.
Oh.
So I think you really do, when you hit that level where you can't do it anymore, you've got to outsource.
Yeah, that's it.
Because
and I think, I'm part of on my Facebook, I'm on, Queensland brides, Victorian brides, Brisbane, Melbourne, Sydney brides, all these different pages, because I love weddings and I like to see people who've gotten married, and this is how I find weddings. But, you know, I will say, and these are, you know, platforms for couples to, you know, vent or ask questions or get excited about their days. The amount of conversations in there where these lovely couples are kind of needing to have a vent or needing to kind of bounce ideas back and forth with other couples getting married, of families who have absolutely come in and are taking over or are refusing for certain things to go a certain way, or the high maintenance of family. I will say especially family members, but there are friends as well. And I read these and it just blows my mind.
It's heartbreaking, isn't it?
These people are so, like, some people will come in saying, I think I'm just at the point of calling this off because I'm so tired and I can't do it anymore. And I think one of the biggest takeaways from reading all of these, which everyone's like, what does Miss Rose do in her spare time? I read. One of the biggest things that I get from it is that a lot of these people, you know, it's one person. And I will say, in terms of gendered norms, it's usually the bride who is coming in saying, I don't feel supported by my partner. My partner we're having family dramas. It's either I'm not feeling supported by my partner, or it's my family and my partner's totally backing me up. But how do I deal with this? Like this, it's such another layer that you don't need in an already stressful time. And I think, look, there's no clear-cut tool, I think, for how to go about this, but I think you sort of need to try with your partner to just be in your own bubble. Like, yes, back to what we're saying about delegating and outsourcing, but in terms of making the actual decisions on the day, not on the day, but in the lead up and on the day, it comes down to what you and your loved one, who the person you are marrying, that you're going to be married to for a long time, it's your day and you get to choose these things. And it's kind of trying to turn the noise off from a lot of people who will come in with ideas and, you know, the unsolicited advice or ideas that come at you when you either get married or have children. Like,
I agree. You need to put that little bubble around you and be so protective of it.
And give yourself, time to go, all right, well, we've had enough of planning for this week. Let's take ourselves out for froyo. Let's take ourselves out for a wine. Let's go for a hike. Trying hard to bring joy back to the whole process, and remember that it's the both of you. It's not just one of you running the show, or one of you choosing something, or one of you feeling like it's you against the family.
We talk a lot about wedding mission statements as well, about sitting down with your partner right at the beginning of planning your wedding and going, what is important to us? What do we want our day to feel like? And even coming to the point of going, okay, what are 3 things are like non-negotiable? Like, okay, we want amazing food. Music's really important. I want my dress, or whatever it is, so that when this noise starts and when everyone starts to go, oh, you should do this and you should do that, you two have something that you can come back to, knowing that this is what we both sat down and wanted our wedding to feel like and be, and everything else we can just say no. Like, Mum really wants this. I don't really care. I'm going to say to her, like, okay, go for it. I don't care, because that's not one of the things that's so important to me.
I love that. That's great.
Exactly. And
it's a constant reminder of what is important, because you can get caught up in all the little nitty-gritty stuff, and you do have to step aside and say, actually, do I care about this, or can I just let it go? But if you've got that list going into it of what really matters, then you can just focus on that, and you can that's a way of keeping protection of your little bubble.
That's right. And I think that's also a really great way of making sure that both members of the couple are equally reflected in the day. Like, it's not just one person in their bubble, making all the decisions and planning the whole thing by themselves, and hence it kind of looks like their day. And look, for some, like, if you're the type of person who is so happy to do that and is like, do you know what, my partner has no interest and I'm actually okay with that because I know how I want this to look and they really don't care. We've had the conversation. Again, it's about communication. Yeah. If one of you is happy to take on that whole entire load, then you know what? Do you. Like, do your couple, like do your relationship, then run wild with that. But I think what can happen in those circumstances is that one side of the couple is very clearly shown where the other one is kind of along for the ride. And I think if you can keep coming back to your bubble and having these conversations about what do you want, what's important to you, like making sure it looks like your day and letting some things go, being able to compromise and say, I really didn't want a Spider-Man cake. But do you know what? You love Spider-Man and I don't care about cakes that much.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. You think to yourself, can I let this go?
Well,
and at the end of the day, does it matter?
Because, this whole planning process and your wedding are just part of your whole, not just, but they're part of your whole relationship, of your whole marriage. Like you can't, I think a huge tip would be you would, as well as you can, trying to track along how you want your relationship to look, not just about the day. Like you want to be kind to each other. You want to give each other space and time and the opportunity to speak about stuff and to be able to say, I've felt nervous about telling you that I don't want to wear a tie or that I'm not going to have a veil. Do you know what I mean? Like it's creating space for both of you to be able to have these conversations so that after the whole thing's done, you're not going to have like a post-wedding come down of I totally felt just railroaded that whole time, or I felt like you were totally disengaged that whole time. Like I think it's a check-in. It's constantly checking in and giving that self-care, not just for yourself, but for your relationship.
Absolutely. And I think it's okay for you to say to your partner, I need you to do this for me. Or like even though, the cake may not be for them, but just saying, look, I'm almost at my bandwidth. Can you just take this off my plate and I'll take it back later. But for right now, I just need you to take this so I can,
or even just take it because it's your wedding day as well.
Exactly.
And if you really don't want to carry all the bandwidth, then your partner can. It's the same as household, right? Like you're sitting there and you're washing up and your partner walks along and does something and whatever it is. And you think, well, couldn't you just have cleaned that up?
Yeah.
It's the same with wedding planning. Like I can't do this on my own. Can you do this?
Well, and
can you take it off my plate?
Exactly. And I don't think it doesn't need to be a fight. It just needs to be if you're in the process of this planning and you're kind of going, oh, gee, I think I'm carrying a lot of this. It's, saying, hey, let's make a really lovely dinner and sit down together and have a chat about this because I'm not, there might be a reason why your partner's feeling a bit disengaged with it. Maybe there's a lot on at work. Maybe they're exhausted. Maybe they're sick. Like there could be reasons why they're not connecting. Maybe they're saying, I actually thought you wanted to do this and that you wouldn't like my ideas. There's possibly a reason behind it. It's not that, not always, that they're lazy. Like maybe they just don't feel as passionate about all the tiny little details, but it's giving yourself those moments to work that out and working it out lovingly and gently.
And you can mitigate this as well, right? Like you can make sure you're both present at appointments. You can have a joint email address where all the vendor correspondence goes. So one person is not in charge of bills, or maybe you have one person in charge of bills so then, they're being paid, but you're both seeing the correspondence. You can make sure that when you're making decisions, there's a list of vendors, etc., instead of one person making the decisions and then you go through the short list. There are things you can do to make sure it's not all on me because I'm the only one corresponding with everyone or I'm the only one meeting with people. Like make sure if you want people in each other involved, you have to make those appointments and emails, etc., together.
And that's the thing. That's such a good point because do you know what happens if one of you guys all know this, do you know what happens is that if one of you is getting all this correspondence, if one of you is making the appointments, if one of you knows what you've been talking about, you then have to double explain that information. You have to have that conversation with your vendor or whoever it is. You then have to turn to your partner and tell them the exact same conversation, the exact same information and the dates. You're double handling this job.
Absolutely. And let's not forget that amidst all of this wedding planning, life is going on and you're probably both working full time and, all the other life commitments that you have. that's still all going on amidst this.
That's it. I think that comes down to as well, like some, in terms of like the length of engagement you have, some people just want to get the planning done, bash it out and want to get married. And I also quite love that because they just go, right, quick game's a good game. Like let's get this planned and it is going to be what it's going to be and we'll get it done quickly. And other people go, do you know what? I want a good long time to be able to plan this and know what, that I've got the time to do this with the capacity that I have in life now, that we both have in life now. But I think it's giving yourself, it's sitting down and going, this is our date. This is what's important to us, and actually doing a little bit of planning of like who's going, do you have a lot on at work? Do what's happening in our lives at that point? Are we both going?
Who's going to be responsible for X, Y, Z?
Are we both going to be able to commit to this together so that we get it done in time and one of us isn't picking up the slack? But it's also then going, do you know what? Like Julia just said, life is still happening around this, but what we also need to include in life is self-care and mental care for ourselves, not just in the wedding planning side of it, but just in the everyday of it, of actually saying, I need to still be able to go to the gym. I still need to be able to have my cup of tea and book at night. I still, I still need to go and have time with my friends. Like, it's not letting it absolutely take over your whole life, because that in itself is stressful. Planning something it can be very stressful.
For us, that was dance lessons. We would go, like, I don't even know why we did dance lessons, to be honest, because we had a hilarious. No, but I know it's hilarious, but like, no, but like we had this. We danced. Our first dance was to a Barry White song because we love Barry White.
Yes.
But like, we just wanted something nice to do for ourselves, and it ended up being the best thing because it was like once every couple of weeks we would go and do this dance lesson, and it was like not wedding chat, and then we would go and have dinner afterwards at like a local little restaurant. But it was like my favorite time of wedding planning, because it was like we weren't talking about the wedding, we weren't dealing with the wedding, but we were like doing something fun together. And I think that's really important during wedding planning, is doing something fun together that is not like, okay, where's the wedding budget? And okay, have we booked this vendor? And all this stuff of like remembering, okay, this is why we actually like each other.
Exactly.
Amongst all the stress.
Oh yeah, this is really handy that I like you. I'm about to marry you. Like it's
I do still like you, just checking.
Yeah. Oh good. We're good. This is going ahead. Brilliant. Yes, let's go dance. Like it's No, that's such a good point, because it can be wedding related. Like you both for dance lessons, it can be wedding related, or maybe it's something like I can't do wedding stuff right now. Let's hike. Let's go to a movie. Let's Yeah,
what do we love to do together? What can we do this weekend instead of just wedding planning?
But that can roll into wedding planning as well. I think I'm worried that I'm making
100%.
it sound all very like hard work, and while it is hard work, I think there are so many moments for really enjoying it. You can go and look at flowers together. You can go pick food together. You can go pick cakes. You can try. Do you know what? Actually, I love the idea of, let's say that you're really into cocktails and you're like, okay, we want to make like a signature cocktail for our wedding. Putting aside a Friday night, or a succession of Friday nights where you go, we're going to together, we're going to put music on, we're going to make dinner, and we're going to try out a new cocktail to see if that's the one we want to, serve our guests, and actually have a bit of an at-home date night like that.
I love that. Like, that's so great.
Creating these really lovely moments that you can get really excited about the day as well, because while it's very stressful to plan, weddings are so fun. Like they're fun, and music and joy and love. So it's remembering that that's what it is, and injecting that back into the planning process with your partner for sure, where you can. I know that's, look, it's easy to say after the fact.
No, one of my other favorite moments was, because again, I was like, I'm not doing this on my own. I was like so stubborn. No. We sat down with gin and tonics and wrote our wedding ceremony. Like, you can make really nice moments out of stuff that, like, a wedding ceremony doesn't necessarily feel like a fun thing to do, like writing it. But you can make these moments really special, because it's like Christmas, right? Christmas is not just about the 25th of December. It's about, all that fun stuff. You go out with your friends and you wrap up the presents and you do the menu planning and all that stuff. And so while I was stressed during wedding planning, when I had to be away from work or whatever, and I was like, I have to go to this appointment, I'd be like, but it's about the process. It's not just about this one day. It's about the process. And, when we talked earlier about having friends help you with DIY and having those sort of moments where you have a cup of tea and you're all folding things and crafting things and having that moment where we had a gin and tonic, we wrote our wedding ceremony, and making those moments really special and appreciating them for like, here we are sitting down writing our wedding ceremony. And here we are with our friends doing this stuff and really making them a bit magic with, you know, a glass of bubbles or something a bit special, so that you do have that sort of magic in the moment. It's not just so much of a chore.
Exactly. And I think that creates space for each of you to feel A, really comfortable, B, really connected, and safe to sort of say, hey, just on the topic of the wedding, I'm not really keen on this, X, Y, Z. Can we compromise? I'm feeling like we're really connecting now. I feel like I'm safe to have a bit of a chat about this. And I think in that loving space, a lot of people are really happy and safe to, be really honest with each other. And that, again, comes back to reflection of both both couples being reflected. Like, it's just creating these beautiful, safe moments for each other to remember that why you're doing it and who you're doing it with. Like, absolutely. I think there's the whole planning, the lead up. Something that I feel like doesn't get chatted about as much is the post-wedding come down.
Oh my God, I had such a come down.
Oh, okay. Ms Polka, what is the post-wedding come down?
Like, for me, it was literally getting up the next morning and saying to my mum, I ruined the dance floor, because we had a food truck downstairs at the end of the dance floor, and I went down and I felt like everyone followed me, so I felt like the dance floor ended early. And then for the next couple of weeks, it was just like this absolute fog and haze. Now, I'm like I'm a complete introvert, and we managed to have a dinner the night before our wedding, which was, if you're an introvert, really great idea, because you're like not exposing your deep vulnerabilities in your wedding vows for the first time in front of all, like, it's not the first time you're seeing your guests, right?
Yeah.
You've seen them the night before, so you've kind of broken that barrier. But the emotional hangover, the vulnerability hangover, the hangover of now I don't have to do all this stuff, the excitement hangover, there was just like, I was so flat and exhausted and just completely crashed.
Yep.
And I know this is not abnormal. I know so many people have this. I see it constantly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not even that, it's not about being sad that you're being married.
No.
It's just about all that emotion and tasks and stress and energy has just gone through you, and you've kind of like on the other side, and you're kind of like, okay, I've been building up to this day for a year or however long. The marriage is now, we've done it. Oh God, like now what is my new normal? And I'm on the other side of all this vulnerability. Oh my God.
Yep. And some people love the wedding planning. They love the wedding planning, and they've loved the wedding, and it's done. And it's done.
Yeah.
It's done. Like,
and there's nothing. What do I do now?
What do I do now?
What do I do with all my free time?
What do I channel? Where do I channel this now?
Yes.
On that, like, I had a blast, but oh gee, I wish this was slightly different. Oh, I'm upset that didn't happen. I still, to this day.
Oh yes.
And this is again 13, whatever. Please say 13's right. And Lewis listens to this and goes, it was 14, Mary. That 13 years on, I still go, the fairy lights did not look how I wanted them to look. That's my still now. I go, oh, like I get a bit of a no.
I'm still mad that I didn't drink champagne on the morning of my wedding. I'm like come on, why didn't I? Like, there's those things that you sit and you roll over in your brain. Yeah. Like, I understand.
We do. We all do. I really don't think there is a single couple out there who has gone, every single thing was exactly how I wanted it. Look, if they do, I'm so jealous. And that's amazing.
Was yours, Julia? Do you have any regrets?
I'm hesitant to say this, but I would have had a smaller wedding. I think because we had it at Mum's house and we just sort of went all out with, getting the 3 big teepees, we didn't really have a number that we could cap it. So, Mary, correct me if I'm wrong because you were there, but we had in excess of 200 people, and I would just have a slightly smaller wedding.
Possibly. Do you know what? A, it was beautiful, and B, it didn't, because you had capacity for that amount of people. It didn't seem like a lot of people, but I know what you mean in terms of it meant you probably weren't able to get around to everyone.
Well, that's it. We felt like we just, you said hi to everyone, and then an hour later you're actually saying goodbye to everyone, even though we had a really early ceremony to sort of drag the day out because we wanted to relish in it. But it just felt like we couldn't see everyone.
Yeah.
I was the same though. Like, we had a 2:00 ceremony, and I think our wedding went till midnight. And I felt out of body the entire day. Yeah. And I think that's because I was such an introvert, and it was like so much intensity of guests and people you were looking forward to seeing, and emotion, and you were so vulnerable in your vows and all that stuff. And you're just like, what is going on?
Yeah. What's
I was
happening
so out
around
of
me?
body the whole time. I was not present.
Yeah.
And I don't think taking 5 minutes away to be present would have helped
Yeah.
because it was just such a surreal thing.
Yeah. And you'd probably have taken, and I know that's something what a lot of people say in terms of vendors will say to the couple. And I do really love that they do this. I've seen it written a few times where a couple has said, oh, my photographer or my celebrant or whoever or my wedding planner said, go and take some time together. And while I love that and I think that everybody should do that, I did not and I wish I had. I still know what you mean, Dot, about it's still so surreal. You're like, hey, like, how you doing?
Yeah, I honestly think I would have been like that. Like, hey, it's our wedding day. And, like, you know, looked at each other with these giddy faces, but not really being present in that moment because what the heck is happening?
It's a world.
We've been enjoying very fine weather. Like, it's,
Yeah, I would have been so like that. Because it felt like I was watching myself from out of my body. Like, it was my wedding day, but oh my gosh, exactly. I couldn't actually correlate that.
It's a lot of pressure and it's a lot of intensity on you and your partner, and it's a lot.
Yeah, it is. And look, some people love that. Yeah. Some people thrive under that and go, yes, bring it. It's my day, and good for them.
Especially the extroverts in our world.
They do, and you know, good for them. I'm so glad that they're having this
awesome
day. I know that's amazing. Yes. But there are so many people who just go, oh, I can't fathom it. Like I'm going to be so scared of this. And again, that comes back to the conversations of what are you going to want for the day and what am I going to want for the day, and can we meet in the middle so we both feel comfortable and safe? In terms of like expectation versus reality, did your days look like, thinking about it now and thinking about the planning process, did your wedding days look how you expected them to, or do you think that you went away going, that felt so different to what I thought it would be?
I think our wedding looked pretty much how we wanted it to. Yep. We sort of wanted a bit of a festival vibe.
It was, yeah.
In the cane fields with a pizza oven and fairy lights. I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Look, I think mine did because I was so adamant and stubborn about the fact it was not just going to be my day, and I was not going to buy into this bride being the center of the day stuff that I hated so much. So it was really about the things that we loved together and the things we wanted to show off together, and the things like we both did DIY. We both had so much input into every part of the day because I refused to have it any other way. So I think I appreciated that. I didn't realize how out of body I would feel, and I didn't realize how non-present I would feel, and I don't know if anything could have prepared me for that.
Yeah.
But the rest of it, sure. But like the emotional side of it, I'm not sure anything could have prepared me for.
No, I totally agree with that. And I think, Mary, your question was, did it look different?
Sorry, that feel too, I think.
Yeah, no. Well, I took it as, did it look different? But I mean, in our relationship, I am an extrovert and Emily is an introvert. And so, of course, you imagine the assumed roles you will have on the day. I was completely overwhelmed and on the verge of running away almost the whole day because I was so overwhelmed. And Emily really had to carry me through that day. And you would almost think it would be the other way around. The shy person is the one struggling with all of that.
I think that was it, the overwhelm. The overwhelm is, and I feel like we spent so much time on our vows and our ceremony, and I didn't really put into account how much saying that in front of our guests, we didn't have a huge guest list, we only had about 60 guests, would make me feel vulnerable.
Yes.
And all that's kind of, like you really are on show on your wedding day. If you are an introvert, you kind of are going, oh gosh, this is a lot of myself to put out there. And I didn't account for that.
I think when I was planning, I was like, just get the ceremony done and then we have a party. Like, that's what we're going to do. Like, just get the set. Like, we got married at midday and we were like, all right. And we didn't have as many people at our ceremony as we had at our reception. We had X amount of people at the ceremony, and then sort of everyone else was invited to the reception, and which I know usually goes the other way around, but it was all at my parents' house and our own rules. And I was like, okay, to Lewis and I, we were both like, let's just get the ceremony done and then we can have our photos done for like an hour and then let's party. this is a nice thing, I didn't account for how much I would actually enjoy our ceremony. Like, I look at photos now and I look euphoric. Like, I am so happy. I didn't expect to feel as, like, that sounds terrible. I didn't expect to feel that happy about getting married. No, I just thought, well, this is perfunctory. I need to get this part done so that I can then go on and just enjoy the rest of the day. But I loved walking down the makeshift aisle and seeing all my loved ones. I got an absolute buzz from that. Lewis at the end of the aisle, I was like, there he is. Okay, good. And our flower girls were funny and cute. And it was just, and then I was standing up there with, one of my nieces on me for a lot of it as well. Like, it just these things where I didn't account for these really beautiful little parts of the ceremony that would really fill my cup and would make me really happy at the time. And I just felt really loved. I felt so, not just by Lewis, but by our family and friends, which I can't explain how beautiful that was. And I didn't expect it. So that was a really happy surprise in terms of feeling. I feel like Lewis and I didn't, and you might listen to this and be like, this is incorrect, Mary. But I felt like we didn't, throughout the rest of the day, apart from our lovely photos, we didn't take that 5 minutes to have with each other, which I wish we did, because I think we were so busy. Like I said, we were people pleasers, and we were just really into jumping around to seeing everyone and making sure everyone got some of our time. And while it was really, really fun, I wish we'd spent more time together, like more time intentionally together in terms of expectation versus reality. I really wish those fairy lights had been better. That's for sure.
They're blue. And like, were they golden warm?
No,
or were they cool?
There should have been more. I had this whole like fairy tale Twilight thing in my head how this was going to look, and they were very sparse. Like,
yeah, no, always overbuy fairy lights, friends.
Oh, yeah,
always
actually,
overbuy.
If there's one thing you take from this discussion, it is buy heaps of fairy lights.
Absolutely.
So what kind of advice do we have for couples?
Apart from fairy lights, right? No, sorry.
Apart from fairy light buying, when it comes to bandwidth, because there are so many amazing resources now, like with the Fair Play method and everything for house and home life. But with weddings, I mean, we've touched on this.
Yeah.
Have conversations, because this is your foundation of your relationship. It really is.
Yep.
Yeah. It's when things get tough, it's going to be like this. You're going to have figure this stuff out
together. You're going to have to figure it out together. Like that's where it comes down to. You have to communicate. Like, you have to really gently make space for each other to be honest and fall apart or have an amazing time, or have the discussion.
Recognizing the capacities you have available.
Yeah.
As well, and figuring out then what you can do to ease that if you can't cope with it.
Exactly. And I think in terms of the mental bandwidth of it, it's also physical. Like, if you are absolutely drained from, weeks of planning, I think it's really important to recognize for yourself, and hopefully your partner will as well, to say, hey, stop for a bit, take the weekend, let's go away, let's have a weekend in at home and let's get movies and popcorn. It's saying to yourself, I have to stop for a bit. Like, I need to just put this on ice for a little bit, or recognizing it in your partner and saying, you need to put this on ice. Like, we need to come back to each other and connect, because.
And even saying, well, I don't want to be responsible for all of this.
Exactly.
Which is what I was so adamant about. I don't want to be responsible for all of our wedding. I will do it. Like, we do a lot of stuff where I do the research and he does the hard work, the physical stuff. So with our wedding, it worked the same way. Like, I would come up with a short list and we would sit down together and go through it. Like, you need to choose the way that you make decisions if you don't want to do it all yourself, so that you can make it together.
That's it.
And that the load is shared. How can you share the load between you? Is it the fact that one of you researches and one of you chooses? Is it that you delegate different tasks? Like, what is it going to work for you and the way that you both work?
Well, you're working towards your strengths. How do you work? How do you work better? How does your partner work better? And you're right. What does that mean? Like, what does that look like in terms of planning, so that it is as equal as possible, so that your mental bandwidth doesn't absolutely drain? But it's then recognizing when you are at that point and giving yourself the self-care and your relationship the self-care that it needs.
100%.
Absolutely. It does. Look, I think we've chatted a lot, which we tend to do.
Look, I thought we'd chat longer on this subject, to be honest.
I thought we would too. I think we've really thoroughly covered a bunch of ideas. We've delved into our experiences that we've read about. I think, yeah, like saying we've capped kind of what we feel is mental bandwidth, what that looks like for you as a couple, you as an individual, what it looks like for your families, what that could mean. And yeah, and hopefully this chat will just even help one couple find a smoother way to the aisle.
Absolutely. And Mary, you said at the beginning, join those Facebook groups and ask for advice, because if you're going through it, I guarantee 300 brides have gone through it, and they will be able to offer advice. Just getting support.
Reach out, and also lean on your wedding vendors. That this is something that we're really passionate about, and that I know a lot of the vendors who have written for us talk about finding really good matches between who you are and what you want for your wedding day, and what your relationship is, and the vendor to do the job for you on the day.
And we didn't even touch on that, did we?
No.
In that if you hire good vendors, they take the mental bandwidth for you.
They really do. And they get to know you. Like, this is the thing about wedding vendors, guys. Like, this is the thing about wedding vendors are lovely. They are happy. They are fun. They're in an industry. They are talented. They are in an industry that is so beautiful and happy and fun that they want to connect with you. They want to be friends with you. They want to vibe with you, because when that happens, it's a creative industry. So when that happens, everyone gets the outcome that they want. And when it's sort of, I've read quite a few real weddings where the couple will say, oh, our photographer has just become like our bestie. Oh, my celebrant was, awesome. And they kind of kept checking in, throughout the whole process, and kind of said, hey, let's sit down and chat together. Like they are an untapped resource in terms of throwing ideas back and forth.
And this is what you're paying for. There is sometimes a difference between paying a bit more for a vendor who has seen it all before and who can carry that mental bandwidth, because, hey, they know how to do a timeline, or they have worked at that venue before, or they have organised this kind of wedding, so they know that after this happens, and that you need to think about this and this, instead of you, who has never planned a wedding before, having to go, oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
Yep.
And they can also offer you protection on the day.
Yeah.
So if you're a couple who, you don't love standing there for hours posing for photos, tell your photographer, and they will have other ideas for you.
That's it. They'll make you
100%.
feel much more safe and much more comfortable, and create this time on the day for you that you really enjoy, as opposed to feeling like really scared of, like, for sure. And that's why planners are amazing. They'll run everything along beautifully, so you just don't have to think about it and have to run, check your watch constantly. Are you wearing a watch? It didn't go with my outfit. What's the time? Having
we have to be here now.
Yeah, exactly. That's wonderful vendors. Beautiful. I just think, this is such an important topic that, like we said at the beginning, hasn't been touched on as much as what I think we would like. And so hopefully there's been a bit in this that couples can take away and put into practice for when they're planning their weddings.
Thank you so much, Team Polka.
Thank you.
Our pleasure. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Feel Good Wedding Podcast. As always, you can find a full written transcript and all the links to today's show notes over on weddingpodcast.com.au. We would love to know your thoughts about today's subject, wedding bandwidth. So hop on over to Instagram or drop us an email and send us a message. We'll be back very soon with another episode for you.